We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. We might have a slightly shorter podcast this evening because we're starting a bit late, but we will make it through as many questions as we're able.
Yeah, it's first week of school.
Yeah, understood.
First week of virtual school, so it's been all right actually over here. It hasn't been too bad. There's a lot of my wife insists that I join a bunch of Facebook groups for parents, which is it's got a high whinge factor. Is how I would describe it. There's a lot of people who are complaining about a lot of stuff, and it's just very specific stuff that I not only don't care about, but I think that you're blowing out of proportion. So, anyways, we've gone all right over here. We've had very few, no technical issues that I'm aware of that were on our side, or even in between anything. There was the biggest issue is we've had a teacher that was been out.
Okay.
So, and then the kids have been turning stuff in, and some of the teachers say they haven't, which is going to be a learning curve.
Ongoing
for everybody.
thing. All right.
But yeah, it is what it is. So. Virtual school.
Well, to give a little positive update on my side, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that there was a quote-unquote outbreak, ultimately one person at the retirement home where two of my aunts live. Thankfully, that has now been declared, I guess over, enough to the point, it's been the 2-week quarantine, no further cases, so they are allowing at least folks to come out of their apartments and maybe take a walk around the grounds and that type of thing, which for older folks, definitely nice to hear that they are no longer completely confined to their apartments. So some positive news there, and hopefully things go in the correct direction where I live.
You need to get out sometime.
No kidding.
Man. I mean, you just need to.
Well, yeah.
And I can't, all those... I'm about as hardcore as you can get when it comes to wanting to lock myself and my family down. But at the same time, about 3 p.m. on a Saturday, my wife and I look at each other and go, we got to get out of this house. we got to go somewhere. It doesn't have to be anywhere. Like, we can just get into the car, drive around, and then come back. That would be fine. We just can't be in here any longer. It's just oppressively hot outside, so it's very hard here. But come a couple of months from now, we're going to be in... we're going to be in paradise. Everybody else is, the farther north you go, the more snow you're going to encounter, and the less you're going to be able to do outside. All those restaurants that are doing that alfresco dining, that's going to get shut down. No one's going to sit outside in their mittens and try to navigate.
Yes,
a Philly cheesesteak.
Outdoor school in Canada in October, November, probably not going to remain. So yeah.
It's still going to be hot here, Rob. 50% of the Halloweens I've had here were too hot to wear a costume. That if that costume was anything other than a swimsuit, It was just too hot. So it's still going to be hot here. So we're this part of the country is better equipped than most to, at least for small businesses like restaurants and other places, to ride the year out. I'm very, very concerned about those up north who won't be able to do that. So if you're in that camp, hopefully something happens between now and then where you won't have to deal with it. But best of luck to you, and our prayers and thoughts or offerings to the musical gods all go out to you. There you go. This is AV Rant, the podcast that only occasionally offers a goat to the audio gods to get better bass, lower extension,
pretty rare,
more output. It is pretty rare. Goats are hard to come by these days.
Yep.
I actually think goats are like super cute.
They are.
Like goats, I mean, even like the old, like some animals, like they start off real cute and then they, aren't. But I think goats kind of stay cute because they look at you with those weird old eyes of theirs and you're like, yeah, that's just awesome. Goats are just awesome, and they climb stuff, which I can totally relate to. So if I had enough room, I would have a goat, and I would build them probably something that would fall down, but then I would have somebody else build them a thing that they could crawl up on top of, and it would be like a jungle gym for goats.
Okay,
I think that would be cool. All right, this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us a question at avrant.com. Go to avrant.com, leave us a comment there, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, youtube.com/avrant. You can contact us directly, Rob at avrant.com. Our Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom.
Yep.
Thank our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you can support the podcast in some way. That's all you got to do. Figure out some way to support us. We don't care what it is. You can, it's an athletic supporter. It's an audio supporter. It's just like a cable riser, which you are.
Sure.
If you're going to be a cable riser, be one of the ceramic ones that look like they just chopped them off the top of one of the telephone poles.
Right.
Because that's the kind I think are the ones that are just like sticks that are rubber band together. That just feels like a ripoff.
All cable risers are a ripoff.
The ones that are ceramic at least took some. I mean, somebody had to risk their lives to climb up there and chop them off, Rob. That's worth something.
Reclaimed.
So if you want to support us, you can go to avrant.com, click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and go to a PayPal donation site where you can transfer some of your PayPal money to our PayPal, or use your credit card to do the same. So we want to thank Kris, David, Andrew, and Arturo for doing that this week. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, that's very nice to see all that support. Kris, David, Andrew, and Arturo, thank you all very much for those PayPal donations. We appreciate it.
We also want to thank our 124 patrons over at patreon.com. That's up from 122 next week. Almost back up to 125.
Hope so. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Only it's $1. So patreon.com is a service that allows you to be a supporting member, a cable riser for AVRant. We rise above the poverty line. I don't know what we're trying to rise above.
We're not getting there. We're still well below that.
Not even close. Well, it depends on what country you're in, Rob.
I think all countries, if we were relying entirely on donations to this podcast to survive, we would be well below the poverty line. But yes.
I don't know. I feel like there's got to be some third world country where
hopefully not. Hopefully by this point everyone is making more than that. But yes, patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you would like to sign up, think of it as a voluntary subscription, if you please. And we very much appreciate our 124 patrons over there.
If you can't support us financially, we completely understand. So just tell us what you did and who you did it to, hopefully with their consent, and we will mention you on the podcast. So Nelson dropped our names to Accessories for Less when he bought a Denon X4500H. Fred wrote to Accessories for Less to let them know that his recent X4400H receiver purchase is the third receiver he's bought from them because of us. Dan found some seasoning packet, so this is for good seasonings dressing, that I said I couldn't buy last week and offered to mail me a whole bunch of them, which he did. Cool. And I would have totally taken them up on it, but I'm putting them on the back burner because we are moving out next week. So Monday, I will no longer be in this house. I do not know where I'll be staying. We were talking. That's one of the things that took me so long to get here tonight, was we were looking at Airbnbs and some other stuff, and we had some other offers on the table. We have friends who have houses. We were thinking about using one of theirs, so we're trying to narrow it down to where we're going to stay, and I'll hopefully be close to home, which means really nothing, because this house will be unlivable for about anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. And after that, it will be livable, but it will not have a kitchen.
Right. So it means the podcast is might be a little up in the air. Tom might be here, might not. We're gonna play it by ear.
Not really sure.
But
so I've thought I could go like low, low production value and just use like a headset mic and not all the fancy lights and stuff like that. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe we'll have some guest spots, some guest people coming in. I know DJ wants to come and be part of the podcast.
Could do audio only if need be. So
he hasn't sent me any bribes, so it's not looking too likely on that one. The money talks there, DJ.
Gotcha.
Money talks.
Well, we will thank Nelson and Fred for both talking us up to Accessories for Less. We do appreciate that. And Dan, that was a really nice offer to send some good seasonings packets to Tom. Nice of you to think of him.
I did look at our supermarket today, and they're still out of them. So believe me, I will be looking. And if between now and the time I get a kitchen again, I don't find them, I will 100% be hitting you up.
There you go.
100%. So we also got some notes of gratitude from some of our listeners. Gurinder, who hopes my nose is okay after my headphones smacked me a few weeks back, and he isn't sure Room EQ Wizard is a rabbit hole, maybe more like a black hole. Although he did end up with improved results in the end. Yeah, I don't remember what I was doing, but I went to adjust my headphones. I somehow...
Oh, you were like sitting back down. You were gone for a little bit, and then, they are spring-loaded.
Doesn't sound like me. I'm much more of a consummate professional to step away from a microphone in the middle of a podcast. Bite your tongue,
I was the true pro.
Canadian.
I only barely saw it out of the corner of my eye and didn't even know what had happened, so... Yeah, we're just pro as pro can be over here.
You could literally get stabbed in the middle of this podcast, and I would never know because I have the screen up with the questions on it blown up as big as I can, so I don't have to squint at it. And it could be like a total Scream situation, like the beginning of Scream, like girls getting killed and their parents are on the other side of the whatever. Yeah, that could happen.
Yep.
Don't anybody kill Rob. He's like my favorite of
neither
all
of
the
us is looking at the live chat, so it's not like we're going to see anybody screaming about it there either.
I know. This is total setup for one of Paranormal Activity 6, the podcast. Right. I don't know. All right. Victor sends us a note of gratitude. He says he's a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, but if he ever gets a bit behind on podcasts, he's sometimes part of the 4 Hour Plus Club. He doesn't miss 1 minute of AVRant. Stefan, who says that when he started listening to us about 5 years ago, he put us 4th on his podcast playlist, but now we are 1st, probably because all the rest of the podcasts have died.
that could be part of it. I'm going to choose to believe it's because we've just gotten that much better, Tom.
Attrition. We're just first by attrition. We're just outlast.
Yep.
We're the survivor of podcast. And Michael, he's also a member of the 2 Hour Plus Club, albeit with playback at 1.5 speed. Does that still count? If it helps, he listens to other podcasts at 3 times speeds. 1.5 is for the good stuff. I mean, I kind of, as a artiste, I would like the tenor of my voice to be...
Well, all of them have the pitch down thing, so just speeds up the speed, but pitches you back down to normal.
Yeah, whatever. And Chris and Dan also said thank you. So thank you, for your notes of gratitude, Gurinder, Victor, Stefan, Michael, Chris, and
Yes,
Dan.
I'll just repeat the names. Gurinder, Victor, Stefan, Michael, Chris, and Dan. Really do appreciate those notes of gratitude. Some funny stuff in there, so that's very nice to see. And a big thank you from us to everyone who continues to listen and send in your questions. We really, really do appreciate it.
We do. We absolutely do. So Disney has given a name. This is in the news, so I guess we are. Yeah, news. Disney has given a name to its paid release of Mulan on Disney Plus and explained a bit about how it's going to work. You know what I want to know? When's Black Widow coming? That's literally the only movie I will do this for. Okay? I cannot wait to see Black Widow. I can't wait. I will pay for that one, but I ain't paying for this. Okay, starting September 4th with Premiere Access, you can watch Mulan before it's available to all Disney Plus subscribers. Disney Plus will offer Premiere Access to Mulan for $29.99 on DisneyPlus.com and in the Disney Plus app on select platforms, including Apple, Google, and Roku. Once you have Premiere Access to a Mulan, you can watch as many times as you want on any platform where Disney Plus is available. Your access to Mulan will continue as long as you are an active Disney Plus subscriber.
Yeah.
Well, what if you let it lapse and then you come back?
Well, if it's... Oh, yeah. I don't know. Well, if it's after the time when it's available to all Disney Plus subscribers, because it will be in however many months from now, then that wouldn't be an issue. I'm not sure.
See, I feel like Premiere Access,
that's the name,
for $30 should not. I mean, and they should. First of all, they shouldn't call it that.
Well,
they should just call it the movie, because Premiere Access sounds like for $39.99, I should get access to all the Premiere movies as they come out.
Ah,
not just
no, it's just $29.99, not $39.99, but
$29, whatever. Yeah.
I don't know. That's the name they're giving. I mean, they are not calling it a purchase. They are not calling it a rental. They are calling it Premiere Access. So yeah, that goes right along with what I was thinking.
It's not a purchase and it's not a rental. Right. So yeah, they have to call it something else. But
I think that's all right.
Whatever. This comes from our listener, Alan.
We missed the last part there, just to say that with the Mulan there, it looks like it's not available yet in this form as an in-app purchase from Amazon Fire, and the gaming systems were not mentioned. So that could change, either before the launch or sometime after it. But you always have the option, like let's say the Amazon Fire is the only device you have that you use to watch Disney Plus on your TV. You can go to the website, pay for it there, and then it's available on anywhere that you access. It's just the in-app purchases that are Apple, Google, and Roku for sure.
I hope this does well.
Yeah.
It's not going to get any of my money, but I hope it does well. So this comes from Alan. Options for over-the-air antenna users to get a DVR have been dwindling, but now Channel Master and TiVo have teamed up to offer the TiVo Edge. It's not the X Edge, that's next year's model. Exclusively through Channel Master, it has 2 tuners, a 500GB hard drive, HDR support, and most importantly, its $350 price includes TiVo all-in lifetime service with no additional monthly charges. So Channel Master has been one of the players in this game for a very long time, and I don't remember looking at their equipment and loving it, but this sounds like it's a pretty good fit with the addition of TiVo.
Yeah, because TiVo did away. They discontinued their Bolt OTA for over the air.
Right.
They discontinued that, and people were like, "Hey, what's going to happen? Do you have to get like the highest end thing where you can do either of them from TiVo and pay the monthly subscription and all that?" And then Channel Master used to have their own guide service, but it was 2 weeks and it wasn't.
That was the problem.
Yeah,
that service
wasn't fantastic.
That was one of the reasons I didn't buy Channel Master, because the big problem was the guide.
Right. So yeah, Channel Master and TiVo teaming up for this specific, somewhat niche market. I think that's a great idea.
All right. Aperion Audio has expanded their Novus speaker series, which is now their entry-level series since they discontinued the Intimus series. They've added slim as well as on-wall options available in black and white finish options like all of the Novus series. $275 for each of the Novus Slim satellites and $450 each for the Novus Slim LCRs. So I guess.
It's I'm always happy to see new good.
These are slim and on
Yes.
wall. They're not just there's like a slim version and an on wall version.
No. These are on wall speakers that are slim.
They're slim. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
I'm always happy to see good on wall offerings at reasonable prices. These are not super cheap though, like $450 each, for a pair. That's $900 for a pair of the 2 woofer, 1 tweeter MTM designs that can be used as a center or vertically as left right. But the satellites $275 each, so $550 for a pair. Not too bad there. So yeah, this no longer an inexpensive option from Aperion that the Intimus line is gone, but Novus now looks cool and glad to see on walls.
Novus Slim.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not as big as I thought it was going to be.
No, they're quite compact.
They look like just regular MTM. Oh, they are just MTMs, right?
Yeah.
What's that gray thing around the tweeter? It's just supposed to look like that. They're pretty thin. How thin are they?
I think they're only 3.5 inches front to back.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty thin. I mean, it's not super thin, but it's pretty thin. All right, breaking news. Watch out, Denon. Yamaha announced 2 receiver models for 2020, and one of them has multiple 2.1 inputs. So we can finally recommend a receiver here. Yamaha is starting with their lower-end models. The RX-V4A is a 5.1 receiver with 80 watts per channel for $440, and the RX-V6A is a 7.1 receiver with 100 watts per channel for $600. They have completely new aesthetic and also a new app to assist with setup and control. MusicCast and the option to use a pair of wireless MusicCast speakers as surrounds is still on board. And YPOW with RSC, or what is it?
Reflected sound control.
That's what I meant. And multi-point measurement will be offered on the 6A, the first for that price point. That's actually pretty good. $600. You get RSC. So you get their better... Is it their best?
Yes, this is their best version of YPOW. This has the fur filters and the multi-point measurement, meaning that you move the mic around to various positions. Oh, I guess it's not the very tip top because it doesn't have the 3D multi-point that you get on the 11-channel model. So it isn't that because it's a 7-channel model only.
These are cute. They got a big knob in the center.
They sure do.
Instead of a display, which is the interesting choice, I guess. I feel like there should be a display on either side of that knob.
I know.
I feel like there's a loss.
There doesn't appear to be in the image. It appears that the display is only to the right-hand side of the gigantic knob that is right in the middle. But if you're wondering where to turn up the volume, you should be able to find that.
You should figure that out pretty quick. It's so weird to see receivers without removable power cords. I just feel like you're playing. You have a toy at that point. But this is a pretty powerful toy for people looking for a 7.1 receiver. This is not bad. And these are all 2.1.
Well, there's more. Inputs. There's more info below the picture stuff.
Oh, more info. Okay, wait, I thought we were done. But of course, the big headline is the inclusion of HDMI 2.1 ports. You see, I always know what's coming next because I'm so smart with my big fat brain. That support 4K to 120 and 8K 60, along with all the HDMI 2.1 gaming features like variable refresh rate, auto low latency mode, and quick frame transport. Okay, and more than that, the 6A has 3 such inputs and 1 output, so it's actually a 2.1 HDMI 2.1 switch, and useful for more than just one source. It has not been reported whether these are 48 gigabit per second ports or 40 gigabit per second. Easy for me to say. However, there were some things to clear up. First, strangely, it is being reported that all 4 of the RX-V4A's HDMI inputs are 1.2 with it's 2.1 with 1 output. Meanwhile, the more expensive 6.6. Oh my
god. Numbers and letters, Tom. Numbers and letters. There's no other way for me to write it.
I need a beer or I need a coffee. I don't know which one it is. It is 10 o'clock, 10:30, 10:45. Easy for me to say. And, okay. First, strangely, it's being reported that all 4 of the RX-V4A's HDMI inputs are 2.1 with 1 output. Meanwhile, the more expensive 6A gets only 3 HDMI 2.1 inputs and 1 output, along with 4 HDMI 2.0 inputs. It is strange.
And I want to say here, I am suspicious that on the 4A, I think it actually only has 1 HDMI 2.1 input and output, and then 3 HDMI 2.0. The reason, so if you look on the back of the 6A, it clearly has demarcated 3 of the HDMI ports as separate from the other 4, and the reports are all like, yeah, those 3 are the full bandwidth, 4K 120 capable HDMI 2.1 ports, and then the single output. That seems very clear on the 6A. But on the 4A, you just have the 4 HDMI inputs. They're all together. They don't have a demarcation, a line drawn out or anything, but only one of them is labeled. And if you look at the 6A, the 3 ports that are HDMI 2.1, they are all labeled with suggested names. And I have a sneaking suspicion that only that first port on the 4A is actually 2.1. So, it's early reporting. The press release for this just came out earlier today. So not super certain there, but I wouldn't fully count on the 4A actually being a switch. The 6A, though, very clearly, that has 3 HDMI 2.1 inputs. That puts it ahead of any of the Denon AVRant offerings for 2020.
Yeah. Second, these are scheduled to arrive in September, but they won't support 4K 120 or 8K out of the box or HDR10 Plus either. Those are all supposedly coming via firmware update scheduled for December.
And therein lies the rub, because you cannot count on anything that doesn't have what it says it has out of the box. I mean, I am fairly certain.
It is Yamaha. This is not Emotiva.
That's right.
I mean, they're probably going to do this.
Yes. This will come,
the hardware is if the hardware is in there, the firmware is not the hard
Just
part.
like I do fully expect that Sony with their X900H TV will have 4K 120 support via the promised firmware update at some point. Now, whether they're actually going to hit their target date of December in the case of Yamaha, if it were delayed, I would not be super surprised, but I don't think it's going to be like a year-long delay or something like that. However, if you pick this up in September and pull it out of the box and somehow the PS5 or Xbox Series X are out in like October or something like that, you might not have the pass-through support at that point. Gonna have to wait for the firmware.
Right. Regardless, this bodes well for higher end models to at least have more than one HDMI 2.0. Well, we knew this was coming.
Right.
The 2.1 input support we knew was coming. I agree with Rob. Looking at it, just looking at the back of it, I'm a little suspicious that there might be only one
on that 4A.
On that 4A, but the other one lives.
But yeah, the 4A, I mean, that's their entry level. It's 5.1 only. Doesn't even have Atmos or DTS:X because why would you with 5.1? The 6A, that's pretty nice. If you want 7 speakers, that's a pretty nice model there, and it definitely has the switching. And yeah, I would be shocked if they're 9 and 11 channel models that'll be part of the AVRant series. If they don't have more than one HDMI 2.1 input, I will be very, very shocked. And we'll probably hear an announcement about that within a month, I would expect.
Well, you guys just get ready for us to be recommending Yamaha for a while.
I mean, at least for high-end gamers, we're going to have, if you're only going to have one, if you're like, I'm PS5 and I never want an Xbox Series X, well, hey, Denon and Marantz can handle that. But if you want to get both, then this might be the only game in town until next year.
Right. Some comments from listeners here. Mike on Twitter provided a handy diagram after Rob joked about how difficult it is to remember the exact numbers for RGB full versus RGB limited, and which values represent below black and above white now that we're using 10-bit and 12-bit signals. So it's a chart.
It is. I just, I felt it was handy because sometimes we're trying to remember what the heck are those value numbers, because there is below black and above white information in the limited video range. And this makes it easier than multiplying everything by 16 and then subtracting 1, since the values begin at 0 and not at 1. And, all the fun stuff to do with numbers and powers of 2 and all that. You can look it up in handy chart range.
That's a handy chart. Look how handy this chart
is. It is. To me, it's very handy. It's easier than remembering.
Yay. All right. All these questions are new for this week since last week we finished all the questions because I'm an overachiever. So this is Lee. This is not Lee Overstreet. It's a different Lee. Right. But this is Lee. And Lee has... Okay, I'm just going to read this. Lee has an acoustically transparent... Oh, that makes more sense. Yes. I saw the picture, was like, what am I looking at? Lee has an acoustically transparent screen, and behind it is an alcove where he has his front, left, center, and right speakers on a platform, plus one of his subwoofers in the space below. So there is a trapezoidal-shaped platform, and he's got his left, center, and right, which LCRs. So they are well, actually, they're not MTMs. They're coaxial driver in the center, with a woofers on either side.
Yeah, certainly look like
but
caps.
They're standing up. Yeah, they're standing up. And then he's got ported, it looks like, I'm guessing, a PB1000 underneath there. That's what it looks like when I'm glancing at it. He was, when he was constructing the platform in the alcove, he followed some advice he had heard to line the walls in the alcove with linen acoustic, which is a fiberglass and resin duct liner that is meant to provide thermal insulation plus sound dampening when applied to metal ducts. Acoustically, he doesn't have any particular complaints, but the issue is the smell. He allowed the duct liner to off-gas for a month before he installed it, but now, almost a year later, it still has odor inside his theater. He's considered tearing it out. We would recommend just having regular insulation behind his speakers in the alcove, right? In our experience, is regular fiberglass insulation odorless? Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, like 100%, unless you left it someplace stinky or a cat peed on it or something. I mean, it is. Dude, you tear it out. Don't stop the podcast. Step away from whatever vehicle you're in, and that or whatever. Well, I mean, pull it over first, but. Go tear this stuff out right now. You don't need to live with this. Don't live with that.
No, that's, I mean.
You might have to tear out the carpet now. It might be too late. You might be stuck with it.
I'm not sure how much benefit that was giving you to begin with, and then if there's an odor that's bothering you.
Welcome to my theater. Here's some nose plugs.
A year later, yes, I fully agree that it is time to remove that, and I guess you're gonna have to air out that theater for a while because apparently that smell lingers with the resin that is in there in that linen acoustic stuff. Yeah, that is.
God love you, AVS Forum.
Right.
Thank you for your advice. You are right. This is technically cheaper than buying the stuff I was planning on buying, but now a year later,
I imagine they were thinking of like damping vibration or something, but I'm like, no, just put in an adequate number of screws, and if you have any squeaks or anything like that, silicone caulking. That's what you put in all the edges. Not this stuff, but anyway, that's what he did. Yeah, we would recommend taking it out. And yeah, fiberglass insulation or rock wool insulation, odorless as far as I could. I mean, maybe the instant you open the packaging, there's a very slight odor, but I mean, both of us have had fiberglass-based acoustic panels in our theaters for a long, long time, and I've never ever noticed any type of odor. The only one I could think that maybe might have a slight odor is the like recycled jeans, you know, where they shred up blue jeans and then they treat it with I don't know, it is some kind of, you know, the chemical thing that they treat it with, and that maybe would because of the chemical treatment, but it's supposed to be like hypoallergenic, so even that I don't think does. But anyway, fiberglass or rock wool, totally fine for this.
Yeah. So should he mount bats of insulation on the alcove walls, loosely stuff the entire alcove, or stack the stands, or stand bats of insulation directly behind the speakers with an air gap behind the insulation? I would buy the world's cheap. I mean, this is literally behind the acoustically transparent screen. I would buy the world's cheapest stuff, and then just, I mean, you have to make sure that it's not doesn't have a backing on it. Yeah. Right. You want it to be just raw insulation, and then I would just shove it in there.
I mean, I don't think you need to like literally worry about filling the entire space. If you had an air gap behind some of the insulation, that's great. That's fine. There's no issue there acoustically. So I would have, I mean, I would probably go for rock wool because, you know, it's not going to sag. It can stand up on its own. It costs a little bit more per bat, but it's not like you need tons. And if you aren't filling it up, you know, you just get some like 4-inch thick, stand it up behind your speakers and you're done. And you don't have to worry about anything because it's already a dark color.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you could literally... you could put any sort of insulation back there. You could fill it up top to bottom. You could do whatever you want. Whatever's, you know, going to make you feel good. Maybe you should get some stuff that smells like flowers or something kind of offset.
I don't know if that's available. Scented insulation. I haven't seen it.
Maybe if the jean insulation stuff you buy came from hippies, it'll be all patchouli smelling, and then that'll
that
help.
Stuff does sag. I wouldn't opt for that as the first choice.
Jeans that sag.
Yep. They do.
I know. I have kids. Should he bother covering the insulation with anything or just leave it bare? I would leave it bare. There's nothing to do with it here. I mean, if you get like the insulation I have is sort of a yellow color, right? So it should be just fine behind this acoustically transparent screen. But if for some reason you're thinking, oh my God, everything else back here is black, I would take thumbtacks or staples and just get a big enough piece of speaker cloth and just put that between the speakers and the insulation. Just that would be the only thing.
At most, that's what you'll need. I think if you opt for rock wool, which, like I say, is already a dark color, I don't think you'll even need that. And leaving it bare is entirely fine.
Yeah. This is Rob, not Rob H or Rob somebody else. First up, Rob wanted to comment that until recently, he always thought he valued video over audio, but he recently dug into his backlog of discs that he had purchased but never watched and landed on Beyond Skyline, a sequel to 2010 Skyline, which is an alien invasion movie on DVD. Mm-hmm. This doesn't... Okay, and he says, not a great movie, but it has lots of explosions, and alien machines, and some deep bass, and he was enjoying it, but upscaling a DVD on a 4K OLED is not the greatest video experience, so he looked on Netflix, and sure enough, they had it in HD, so he switched over. The video quality was definitely better, but the audio quality was way worse. The dynamic range was compressed, the subwoofers were barely being used, and the sense of immersion just wasn't there. Dialogue was clear, but that was about it. So despite the lower video quality, he switched back to the DVD, and the experience made him question how many times he's chosen to watch a given movie based on the available video quality without checking if a better version of the audio was available. He realizes now that he might have thought less of several movies because the streaming audio wasn't up to snuff. That's food for thought. This is not a question. This is a statement.
Yes.
This is a...
I prefaced that.
All right.
As a comment.
So Rob is... This is
a question.
Rob has always used an AV receiver ever since he got into home theater. He has heard of separates, but figured it was a case of if you need to ask whether or not you need separates, then you don't need separates. But could we explain what each of the components in a separate setup do? He understands separate amplifiers, but he's heard preamps, processors, preprocessor, prepros, DACs, tuners, blah, blah, blah. Could we give a primer on what each of these are and what they do and why you might want to have them separated? Well, what you're really separating when you get separates is a fool from his money.
I mean, not 100% of the time.
Not 100%. Come on,
of
Rob.
the
I know
time.
that. I know that. So in the home theater, the most basic form of separates is, and you mentioned preamps, processors, preprocessor, prepros. Okay, those are all the same thing.
I mean, effectively in what we have today.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, why don't we just start by defining some of the things? Because if you want to go completely separate, and you're pretty much only going to find that in some very esoteric gear.
Super esoteric, high-end, totally stupidly expensive gear.
But such things do exist. So
they do.
You will first have you will have to have some kind of decoder. That will have to, and it is possible to sometimes find completely separate decoders. So you'll have a source device. Let's say it is a digital source device. So that digital source device.
Oh, not in this sort of setup that you're about to describe.
Not very often, but
it wouldn't be digital. It would be all analog all the way through. But
if it were, you would have a digital source device outputting a digital signal. That digital signal would need to be decoded. Once that digital signal is decoded. And that's all your things like Dolby Digital and DTS and all the various codecs, which stands for coder decoder. Once that is decoded, it will be in uncompressed pulse code modulation digital signal. That's what it will be, and that will need to be converted to analog. So there is a digital to analog converter. That is your DAC, and that is what that device does. And there are, in fact, completely separate DACs that do nothing but convert digital PCM into analog signals. Once you have that analog signal, it will need to be pre-processed. This is where voltage gain might be applied. This is where your volume selection will be done, and if there is anything being done in the analog domain in the way of filters or something like that, that is what the pre-processor would do. Once that has been done, it can be sent over to it could go directly to an amplifier if that pre-processor is a pre-amplifier, and now you have a analog signal that has been processed in all the ways that you want, including selecting the volume level. Now that will be sent to an amplifier, which will amplify that analog signal and send that amplified signal to your speakers. So those are kind of all the parts. You might also see a tuner, which is just a radio tuner, which these days could be satellite or terrestrial radio, or internet radio for that matter. Those would all be considered tuners. And those, in essence, are just another source device. It just happens to be radio as a source device. So you might have heard of an integrated preamp. And an integrated preamp is going to take all of the things that are not an amplifier and not a tuner, and put those together. So It is no source built in, and it is no amplifier built in, but it is all the other things. It is a digital analog converter, it is a decoder, and it is a processor and a preamplifier. So that would be an integrated preamplifier. There might also be an integrated amplifier, which again is all of those things plus amplification, but no sources built in. Once you put the tuner in there, that's what actually turns it into a receiver. A receiver is supposed to be not just an integrated amplifier, but also have source built into it. That is a receiver. So you'll actually see, like over in Europe, a lot of Denon's models are actually labeled as integrated surround sound amplifiers as opposed to receivers, because they don't have tuners built into them, a lot of them over in Europe.
Not anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of defining what all the things are. And then why might you ever need to have them all separated?
Well, okay. So, but for practical terms, what most people in the United States or in this industry are talking about is they take the amplifier section and they split it off.
That's right.
From the pre-pro, right, which has all the sources, all the processing, all the stuff in there, but no amplification.
That's right.
They may not have a receiver, like an antenna input, which means that they may not have that.
Sure. So that would make it an integrated.
Honestly, when was the last time anybody hooked up those things? Anyways, I can't remember the last time I listened to terrestrial radio other than being in the car, and even then I don't really listen to music anymore. My wife does, but I haven't done it inside my house in a bajillion years. I can't think of a reason I would, because the only reasons I would be to hear the news when power had gone out because of a hurricane. But if the power had gone out, then my home theater would be down. So, so for practical terms, here in our home theater, like if you go to Emotiva and you buy a pre-pro and you're in the amplifier, it's just the amplifier section separated out. So what's the thought process behind doing all these things? Or separating them out, especially the way that Rob described at the beginning there, with every
individual piece separated.
So if you subscribe to the notion that it is impossible for a device to do a thing correctly if it's also trying to do another thing, if machines are incapable of doing two separate actions at once, then you believe that separates are a thing that we should have. That the thing that does the amplification can in no way be touching or in the same box as the thing that's doing decoding, or the thing that's doing the digital to analog conversion. If you think that having those things close by each other, the electrical fields will somehow cross and the streams will get tangled, and Cthulhu will rise, Rylith will destroy that, whatever, then you're not only needing of serious help, but you probably have a lot of money. So whatever, people will listen to what you have to say, because it doesn't make any sense, right? It doesn't make any sense. Your car does a ton of stuff all by itself without having to worry about crosstalk or any of these other things. There was a time a long time ago, for most of us, where less things were known and more mistakes were made, and there were things that happened within a box that could have interference or create problems. So therefore, separates were either desired or needed depending on the situation and where you were at. But these days, it's a complete non-issue. The only time you really need separates, and I use that term loosely, is when you're adding an amplification because you have a speaker that needs it in a room that demands it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, effectively what we see in most home theater setups is, just think of an AV receiver, but just take the amplification out of it. So you have two boxes, or perhaps more if you need that many channels of amplification, but it's really just separating the amplifiers from everything else that an AV receiver does. Effectively, that's what most home theater pre-pro plus separate amplifier setups are going to look like. But in the notion of what full separates, where every single device is separated, one of the notions is that we have seen different codecs throughout the years, right? We had Dolby Digital, then we added Dolby Digital Plus and Dolby True HD, and now Atmos, and then all the DTS formats. And one idea was, well, hey, if you could upgrade just the decoder instead of having to upgrade everything else that goes along with it, could that be beneficial in some way? Similarly, as we get higher and higher bit rates and higher sampling rates, could you replace just the digital to analog converter, just the DAC and nothing else because everything else is fine? Could you replace just the processor section because it has new upgraded equalization, right? Equalizers can be external as well. So could you have mini DSP is an example of an external equalization solution where you're not relying on the equalization that's built into your receiver or your pre-pro. You are externalizing all of the equalization and digital filtering and then sending that on to your amplifier. So, that could be separated as well, and saying, hey, we can upgrade our equalization system separate from everything else. The issue tends to be, though, that when you upgrade one of those things, and so few people are buying a system where they're doing it literally one piece at a time like that, upgrading an entire AV receiver is less expensive than upgrading just one component out of there.
If you're looking for the esoteric, standalone Dolby Atmos, this decoder, it doesn't exist.
That doesn't exist.
In fact, it will not exist for probably ever, but at least 10 years.
Maybe in some professional settings such a thing might exist, but not for home consumer
but you
use.
can't afford that anyways. That would be a ridiculous sum of money. That's like movie theater tech.
Right.
You know what I mean? It would have to be a completely separate room with some sort of its own AC to keep it cool.
But we also see from the brands that we have in the consumer world that produce both AV receivers that have the amplification all built in, and pre-pros, where it's essentially that very same AV receiver, just minus the amplifiers and the amplification you buy separately, we'll very often see that the features of the pre-pro are identical to the flagship receiver, and yet the pre-pro that doesn't have amplifiers built in costs more than the flagship receiver sister model, simply because of economies of scale. They sell 10 times, if not more, of those flagship receivers than they do of the pre-pro model. So it's just economy of scale. So even there, the idea, when does it make sense in practical terms? Because I don't think we should spend too much time worrying about the complete separates, because there's very few companies that are offering that to consumers, and it isn't practical or cost effective. But we certainly do have the option of getting dedicated pre-pros, surround sound pre-pros, plus separate amplifiers. And yeah, I mean, it's basically his next question, so we can go into that. But there can be an argument for doing that.
So when does it make sense to use separates instead of an AV receiver? He's heard of it being useful if your speakers have a low ohm rating or if your speakers are difficult to drive. But what's the cutoff where it makes sense to switch to separates? Well, first of all, I don't actually believe you ever need to switch to separates. I think that you get a receiver and then you add an amplifier, which I mean,
and it would have to be an AV receiver that is capable of outputting a pre-out signal to feed an amplifier, because not all AV receivers are. If you have an entry-level AV receiver, it's probably not going to have a full set of pre-outs. It's usually pretty high up in the lineup before you have a full set of pre-outs.
So there's math involved here. Generally speaking, so yes, if you have really low ohm speakers, first of all, if you buy any speakers that we suggest on this podcast at almost any time, you do not need a separate because of its low ohmage. It almost is never the case. Most of the consumer level, or even higher mid-tier to low-tier high-end speakers, they're all going to be around 4 to 6 to 8 ohms. And with reasonable impedances, with reasonable sensitivities. And yes, some will be harder to drive than others, but it won't be what we're talking about here, which is, you need separates, when it dips down to like 2 ohms. Right. Well, yeah, okay, you got your Magnapans or whatever. But
some Martin Logan electrostatics do that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yes, that can happen. You can go find those at Magnolia, but it's a very specific case. But even those speakers, if you're sitting close enough to them, you don't need separate amplification. It's all about the interaction between how hard they are to drive and how far away from you are they. So if you are within 12 feet of your speakers that are your main speakers, basically, and you are wanting to hit full reference volume, if you're within 12 feet and you have a reasonable speaker that we recommend, you're fine.
Right.
If
you'd have to look pretty hard to find something that wouldn't work with that.
Yeah. If you're beyond 12 feet, or if you have a speaker that's harder to drive or has a lower sensitivity, then maybe. But most of you aren't, who are like, oh yeah, I gotta get to full reference. You never do it. You never do it, because full reference volume is freaking loud, dude. It is so freaking loud.
But mathematically speaking, we have seen people who are sitting more than 15 feet away from their speakers,
right?
And it is not. I mean, for example, Emotiva's own speakers that they make now, they kind of make them this way because they want you to buy Emotiva amplifiers to go along with them.
Let's all do the math.
A little bit of that going on there, but they are a true 4 ohm speaker that doesn't go much above 4 ohms in its impedance and does get down into sort of like the 3 ohm range. And so if you're sitting like 15 or more feet away from an Emotiva speaker, which anybody might do that, you are getting into the situation where, if you want to get to those upper close to reference level, full reference level volume levels, mathematically speaking, you're actually going to need more amplification power than the vast majority of AV receivers can supply. And so at that point, if you've done that calculation based on the sensitivity of the speaker, the impedance of the speaker, your distance from the speaker, and how many watts it's going to require to get you to the volume level that you want to reach, you put all of those things together and calculate that, and you can come to the conclusion that, hey, I need more than the 80 or 100 watts that a typical AV receiver can supply. So at that point, yes, you can absolutely make the argument that an external 200 watt or 300 watt per channel amplifier amplifier is going to be able to get you there. Now, must you pair that with a dedicated pre-pro? No. That is not absolutely necessary. You could definitely pair it with an AV receiver that has a set of pre-outs for whatever channels it is that you want to power externally. As long as you have pre-outs for those, then the signal can be supplied to those amplifiers, and it does not have to be a dedicated pre-pro.
I was just looking at those Novus speakers. I agree. Yeah. When I say flippantly, you just buy a receiver, and Rob's like, yeah, it correcting me and saying that the low end receivers, you have to have a receiver that does. If you're at the point where you're starting to think about separates, I already assume that you're in like the 4,000 level, Denon receivers, which are going to have pre-outs anyways. But yes, it goes without saying that, or it goes with saying, I suppose, that you need to have pre-outs. Yeah. Nelson is the fellow whose Marantz SR7010 immediately goes into protection mode as soon as he turns it on, even with absolutely nothing plugged into it besides the power cord. And even did you try unplugging the power cord?
Yeah, that's
might
not gonna
be the
work.
power
No,
cord.
You're gonna need that.
And even after a thorough cleaning inside and out. So Marantz's advice, since it's out of warranty now, he'll take it to a local repair shop to get an estimate. But even if it's a reasonable price to fix, he'll just end up selling it since he has moved on to a Denon X8500H now. I like your moxie, kid. He hasn't run Audyssey in a long time, but he was looking through the manual and he read the full description for Audyssey Sub EQ HT. It says that it first compensates for any level and delay differences between the two subwoofers and then applies multi-Q XT32 correction to both subs playing together. Sure enough, when he did the initial setup for Audyssey, when it was detecting which speakers were present in the system, it played a sweep from each of his two subs independently. But after that, it only ever played a single subwoofer sweep with both subs playing together during the calibration. So, is that different from the way his Marantz SR7010 used to do things? He seems to remember it playing a sweep from each sub every time. Is he mistaken? The 7010, did it not have stereo subs? Was it just the Y splitter inside?
This is a case where you're just misremembering.
Okay.
The SR7010 has multi-Q XT32 with sub EQ HT, and it does the procedure in exactly the same way as your X4500H. So it is just a case that you're misremembering it here.
There you go. So he asks, why do we recommend using a Y splitter and manually setting the receiver to only one subwoofer when Audyssey Sub EQ HT corrects them together in mono, just like we say it should? Because we don't want it to do different delays.
It's actually just basically the distance setting part of it that puts the fly in the ointment. That's the only part of this that is a little bit of an issue with us.
So what you do is, the delay or the distance setting, it's the same thing, is we don't want them to try to time align the two subwoofers for this one spot. The subwoofers are a unit. They should be time aligned together. Now, I believe when we spoke to what's his name, Kris. What's his name?
Oh, Kyriakakis.
Kyriakakis, right? I mean, we talked to him about this, right? And he sort of understood what we were saying, but I don't really know that it's an easy sell to the public.
Because it's a lot of trial and error. It's kind of the only way to do it is a lot of trial and error. This is easier. Yeah.
So, what we wanted to do is we want you to get your subs playing the same volume.
Yes.
And then,
which is something sub EQ HT will accomplish. So, like I say, the only part of it is the distance setting part. We wish you could use it, but you can't get away from the distance setting part of it because, so the issue is we want to have them matched in level. That's fine, but then we don't want them just both time aligned to your seating location like the rest of your speakers are. What we want to do is get uniform bass response across all of your seats. And to do that, you basically have to play with the phase, the fully variable phase is what you need, of just one of the subwoofers to achieve uniform response. And just time aligning them isn't going to do that. I mean, maybe if you luck out, it will. It's not impossible that you could luck out and have it happen, but when you just do it via time alignment, that isn't even the aim. The aim isn't even to try and get uniform response. And that's what we want, is uniform response. Once we have uniform response, then we want to equalize that as a single mono signal, because if it's uniform across all seats, then you can have the same EQ applied across all seats, and that will work. The problem is if you use Sub EQ HT and have your two subs as independent inside of the AV receiver, it will level match them. That's great. That's fine. But then it will time align them. And now when it goes to equalize them, it's after that time alignment has been done. So if you were to go back after the fact and manually change the distances as a way of altering the phase, well, then now the equalization isn't going to be correct, because the equalization was being applied after the automatic time alignment. You've now changed the time alignment, but there's no way to retain what you've just done and just do just the equalization part now. So we're like, if you just use one subwoofer output and say you only have one subwoofer and feed both of your subs with a Y splitter, you can do the phase part of it manually. You can level match them manually, and then it will just apply the equalization because you have manually achieved the uniformity that we want. So yeah, it's a little bit complex. It is tedious to do it. If you were to just run Sub EQ HT, listen to the results and go, yeah, that's pretty darn good. Like, yeah, my left seat isn't quite as good as my center seat, but I'm not sitting there, so I don't care. I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. That is also fine.
Yeah. In my home theater, I think the distance differences were like a foot.
Right.
You know, so and with 20 hertz being like a 60-foot, 50-foot wave or whatever it is. Yeah. It's really the phase differences were not that big. I still did it. Mm-hmm. I still did it the way that we're talking about here, but I probably didn't need to. And I certainly didn't need to for my family, because none of them can tell any difference because they're all deaf. So, all right. Ted has decided it's time to upgrade to Atmos in this 12-foot long, 13.5-foot wide, and 9-foot high home theater. This is a setup where he has a second row of seating right up against the back wall, being elevated by bed risers, and the first row is very close in front of it. I still can't believe nobody's gotten crushed by this whole setup. I think this, every time I see this, I'm like, there's a child that's going to die on this. I'm sorry. But he's got beautiful children that are all still alive, according to Facebook. That's right. He's got a 77-inch OLED and legacy audio silhouette on wall front speakers. He's been using those with DefTech Pro Cinema 1000 surround speakers and a pair of Power Sound Audio 15V subwoofers, all powered by a Denon X8400H receiver. He picked up a used 3-channel D-Sonic M3A 1200 Class D amp, which will use to power his legacy audio front speakers. Why? So now he's deciding to decide what to get as his Atmos speakers and potentially new surrounds. Why? Why would you go with this Class D thing? What is this thing? It's what he wanted.
He's been... we just talked about when would you need external amplification. He's in a very small room, sitting very close. His speakers are a little bit on the difficult side to drive, but given how incredibly close he is to them, he does not need it, but he wanted it. So he bought a 3-channel amplifier, and it happened to be this Class D design from D-Sonic. I'm not super familiar with that D-Sonic amplifier.
I can't find it. I just searched for it, and it doesn't exist.
Oh,
I mean, D-Sonic does.
No, it exists.
No, this must be a used one.
Yeah, it's like 400 watts per channel, I believe, which you'll be using shockingly little of that amount, even at full reference volume. But nonetheless, it's something he wanted. He's got it. There it is.
All right, he's got it. So he's trying to decide on what to get as his Atmos speakers and potentially new surrounds. Before getting to that, any chance that at all adding surround backs would be a good... No, you have people on the back wall. Your room is tiny. You do not need surround backs.
In this instance, I am in 100% agreement with Tom. Tom and I occasionally disagree about surround backs, but in your...
We often disagree about surround backs. Let's be honest here,
in
Rob.
Your case, Ted, I am 100% with Tom on this. You cannot have surround backs. That will not be a good experience.
He has disallowed you from doing this. So let me finish reading the question. Any chance that all that adding surround backs would be a good idea? They would have to literally poke out between the listeners who are sitting in the back row, since they would definitely be on walls. He does not want any in wall, and it doesn't really make any difference where you put them back there. They're too close.
Yeah,
to
even
people,
if they were in wall, it's still a hard no to surround backs in your particular setup. If he's talking about he might be moving in the not too distant future. If you do, you've got a larger room, you've got space behind. If you still have 2 rows of seats and there's space behind both rows of seats, then we can talk about surround backs.
Then we can talk about it. I will still probably say no, but Rob will say yes. So any chance, his second question, any chance he should get more channels of external amplification?
Not right now.
I think you should get these channels of amplification.
And we just said you're not going to have surround back, so you're not going to have 7 floor layer speakers. You're going to have 9 speakers total. We don't think you need external amplification at all in this current setup. Again, if you move to a much larger room, your speakers are much farther away. Possibilities are there. But right now, in the current room that you have, you do not need even the external amplification that you already have. But it's fine that you have it. You definitely don't need more.
As mentioned, he would much prefer on-ceiling as opposed to in-ceiling for the 4 Atmos speakers, but most of the on-wall speakers he has looked at just have keyhole mounts, and he isn't confident in using that to hang speakers on the ceiling. He definitely doesn't want these speakers falling down onto anyone's head. That is completely a non-problem here. Drywall anchors, and if you can find a stud nearby where you want to put them, you literally could do it with 1 screw. As long as you're going into a stud, you're fine. And then the drywall anchors are just like backup. There is 0 chance one of these things is going to fall down.
But it's the securing it to the speaker itself. What are we?
I understand the keyhole mount and stuff, but there's like, at least with like the Emotivas and some of the other ones, there's usually some sort of locking mechanism that goes into keeping this thing in place, that you can put a screw in there or something like that.
If it has a threaded insert, you're going to be very okay with that. Even with the keyhole mounts, you can do just like a nut and thread type of securement instead of just hanging it on there. You fully screwed in. Also, almost all speakers are just made of MDF. And if you aren't worried that you're going to mar the finish just a little bit, putting some short wood screws directly into the cabinets of the speakers is okay. You definitely can do that. So there are multiple ways to come at that. It doesn't have to be something that is specifically labeled as an on-ceiling speaker. It doesn't have to be that.
Yeah. So he keeps coming back to the SVS Prime Elevation speaker since they definitely have a ceiling mount option. But how well would they match up with his Legacy Audio front speakers? I mean, not at all. Legacy Audio is, I've never heard them. I've heard great things about them. Never heard them, but these are Atmos speakers we're talking about.
That's the side of it, yeah.
I don't care, I guess, is how well they match up, because they're Atmos speakers. I honestly think that Atmos speakers play such a small spectrum of the human hearing that timbre match becomes so little of an issue, especially since I think that there's some DSP being applied up there to make it sound the way they want it to sound. I think these are, if you think that you would like these, I think that this would be fine.
Yeah, for Atmos, Prime Elevations are very good speakers. They definitely do have the ceiling mount, if that just makes you feel more comfortable, because yes, it is a dedicated ceiling mount that they have for them. That is absolutely what it's meant for. It is a very secure connection. Tom can tell you, he has them himself mounted on his ceiling. If you were to take Prime Elevation speakers, put them side by side at ear level with your Legacy Audio silhouettes, and A/B compare them, you would be able to tell them apart. That is not going to be a perfect timbre match. I will say, Legacy Audio speakers, they are going for pretty darn good transparency, pretty darn good neutrality. They're not going for some way out there, house target curve to their sound. So they aren't as far apart as you might think they might be just by looking at the differences in components, but you would be able to tell their timbre apart. I'm quite confident in that. But as Atmos speakers, I'm so unconcerned about it that if you're comfortable with the mounting system of the Prime Elevations and that's it, I can still wholeheartedly recommend it in this case.
Right.
Yeah.
He likes the way Revel speakers sound, and they have an on-wall model in their Concerta 2 lineup that he's able to get for a very good price from his dealer, but it's almost £15, and again, not specifically designed for on-ceiling. Would it be worth engineering a way to securely mount it? I mean, this is going to be a lot more expensive, right, Revel?
Well, like he's saying, he can get them at a very good price.
I mean, I don't know what very good price, but
I think
10%
it was
off, 100%
I think it was
off.
saying $200 a piece.
Oh, that sounds very good.
Which is, for Revel speakers, that's really good.
Yeah.
£15 is pretty heavy for an on-wall speaker. Yeah, I mean, this would be one where I probably wouldn't want to rely on a keyhole mount, even one that is like secured with a nut and all that. I probably would want to go directly into the body of the speaker if you were to do it. So, yeah, how comfortable you are with doing something like that. As far as I'm aware, that one does not have a threaded insert.
I don't see anything on the back of this thing,
right?
Man, I'm looking at the M8s, the Concerta.
I think
series
it's the
on-wall.
S16s. I think are the on-wall model there for the Revels.
This says it's on wall.
You're looking at the smaller stick style on-walls. Those ones have like a separate little wall bracket that comes with it, and it's.
Would you call it S16?
I'm pretty sure it's the S16 and the Concerta 2.
Oh, I can't see the back of it.
Yeah, they don't provide a lot of pictures. But I'm pretty sure that one does not have a threaded insert. So yeah, like I say, being Atmos speakers, I'm not worried about how do these speakers sound when I listen to them as a stereo pair. That to me is not a concern whatsoever. So, you know, again, the prime elevations, if you're comfortable with their mounting solution, I'm good to go with that. Yeah.
I'm trying to get this product brochure to download so I can
no,
see
they're
this
kind
thing.
of a trapezoidal shape, although they are only front firing. They are definitely meant to hang on the wall. And yeah, I'm not seeing any images of their backs. So anyway,
I'm not either.
We'll
this is terrible.
move on to the next question. Do you want me to go, Tom, or you're still going to look?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good. So if it doesn't have a keyhole mount, and even if it does, I gotta believe that there's some sort of mounting option that would be. Oh wait, here. Let me just read the next question because apparently I'm answering it. In the other options that might be good, a good choice for on-ceiling Atmos speakers in this particular setup. You know, there's just so many companies out there that make mounts for speakers. I just can't believe that you couldn't find something that would work for this speaker, whatever speaker you want to be on your ceiling. Now, I think that the elevation speakers would be fine.
Yes.
I think that they already have their mount there. They have this. Basically, it looks like a double keyhole.
Mm-hmm.
You slide it into place, and then there's a rubber thing that you slide in behind it to lock everything in so that it doesn't bounce itself out and doesn't rattle up there. And it works pretty good. I don't hear any noise from it.
I just found a picture of the Revel S16's backs, by the way, and it's two keyhole mounts in the top left and right corners. So trying to use that to like flush it to the ceiling, I wouldn't want to secure it from those because it's only in the top left and right corners of the speaker if it were hanging vertically like it's meant to on the wall. So I mean, I was just thinking that if he is trying to look for something that more closely matches what Legacy Audio is offering, because Legacy is all about their air motion tweeters, their folded ribbon tweeters. And while not every folded ribbon tweeter is going to sound the same, I was like, well, what folded ribbon tweeter options exist at a somewhat reasonable price? Now, you could consider Legacy's own Pixel, which is the much smaller version of the Silhouette, but they are $1,800 a pair. And Ted was saying he'd like to keep the cost of like everything, like 4 speakers, plus possibly surrounds, to maybe like $2,000, $2,500 most. So a single pair being $1,800, you're probably not going to go for the Legacy Audio Pixel. But Emotiva, their speakers use folded ribbon tweeters. They have a sort of wedge-shaped option, which is their Air Motive A1. And I was actually thinking a fun thing about this is that they have the proper switch on the back of them to make them into an upward firing or an on-wall / on-ceiling solution. And they have 2 different grills that come with the speaker, one of which sort of blocks the sound coming out the front so that it's got like a taller speaker grill that goes on there if you're using an upward firing mode. And unlike a lot of the wedge-shaped speakers, they actually have the proper switch so that if you're using them in upward firing mode, it applies Dolby's head-related transfer function for the upward firing part of it. And if you're wall mounting them, then you can flick that off and just use it like a regular direct radiating speaker. So kind of a fun option to consider, and they're $300 a pair. It is just a keyhole mount on the back of them, but it's an MDF cabinet. But then actually the ones I think might be most suitable for you are Martin Logan's. They're Electro Motion series. No, just the Motion series. Sorry, the regular Motion series. They've got the 2i and the 4i. That's either $400 a pair for the smaller 2i's or $500 a pair for the larger 4i's. But these ones, again, folded ribbon tweeter. That's kind of what drew me to them. But they're sort of a curved shape, and on the back of them, they have a threaded insert. So if you were to get, like even Monoprice has some very sturdy speaker mounts that use a threaded insert to secure to the speaker and then attach very securely to the wall or ceiling. So that to me might be one of your better options, because if you want to get something that has a folded ribbon tweeter, this is not relying on a keyhole mount. This is a proper threaded insert. It's right in the middle of the speaker on the back of it, and that would be a very secure solution for hanging from your ceiling. ELAC is also out there with their Jet tweeters, which is just their trademark name for a folded ribbon tweeter, but it would be the WS1645, which is $1,300 a pair. So you're already getting pretty close to what the legacies would offer there. But on the back of that ELAC WS1645, they've got like every keyhole mount. There's 5 of them on the back there, including all 4 corners. So you could definitely rig something up on the back of the ELAC, but the price is probably more than you really want to pay for Atmos speakers. So I kind of like the Martin Logans. I think that could be a really good option if you just want something that has a folded ribbon tweeter instead of the Prime Elevations.
So he hasn't been completely satisfied with his DefTech Pro Cinema 1000 surround speakers. Would it be best to get another pair of whatever speakers he chooses for Atmos so they all match? That is not how I would choose my
I'm more worried about the
speakers.
surrounds matching the front 3.
Yeah.
The Atmos speakers can be kind of whatever you want. Again, here I'm like, maybe those Martin Logans, because those Martin Logans are definitely wall mountable. They're not too big. They're not too crazy expensive. And I think those are worth a shot. I mean, you can get them at Magnolia and return them if you don't like them. So I think
You know what I would do? I would set them up as surrounds.
Right.
And then if you don't like them as surrounds, then I would put them over your head as Atmos.
Yeah.
Just call it a day.
There you go.
And then you can keep shopping for surrounds.
Yeah.
You might, I if you get those Revels for such a good price,
That's true.
maybe you give those a shot as surrounds, because those will work a lot better. I see what you're talking. It's the front, on the back of the speaker, it has like a bracket that goes across the entire back of the speaker, but the keyhole mounts are at the top,
They're at the very
only
top.
on the left and right corners. Yeah, I saw it. So I try those. Just as a note, on Twitter, he finally took our suggestion to use the Audyssey Editor app, and now he wishes he'd done it a long time ago. What do you think we do around here?
We just throw out advice, Tom. We base it on
We
nothing.
just say stuff. You know what we do before this? We're like, let's see if we get Ted to do this. It's gonna be hilarious. Watch, we're gonna get him to do Audyssey Editor app. It's gonna be so fun. He's gonna waste his time. It's gonna be awesome. We're gonna introduce him to a Rubik's Cube wizard. Oh my God, his family won't see him for a year. That's not what we do, dude. Previously, he was just goosing his subwoofer output. Now that he's using the Editor app instead, his speech intelligibility has improved, and the lower mid-range sounds noticeably better. So, for anybody else out there sitting on the fence about it, go get the app. Okay.
Yep.
Good idea. I'm gonna take a sip of water here for a second, because making that sound to make fun of Ted hurt my throat.
Ah,
So,
yes. Yep.
I don't want to cough in case everybody thinks I'm going to give him the COVID over the podcast. It's possible, I think. Pretty sure I heard
Hope
that.
not.
I think there was a Q drop about that. Alan has an Epson 5040 UV projector. He manually switches to the Bright Cinema Picture mode for HDR. With Ultra HD Blu-ray discs, things look good and sound good, but he has noticed that the Disney Plus via his Amazon Fire Stick 4K isn't anywhere close. He has tested his internet connection. It's a solid 100 plus megabits download speed. Megabits.
Yeah.
Download speed. It plays smoothly, but HDR looks very dim and almost blurry, and the Dolby Digital Plus soundtracks don't sound as powerful. Have you tried Hamilton? That's in Atmos for sure.
Right.
Is this just a function of physical disc showing up as a 12-bit signal when he checks the info versus 8 or 10-bit when he checks the Disney Plus signal coming from his Fire TV stick? Or is the audio just a matter of lossy versus lossless? It's definitely lossy versus lossless there.
Well,
but you should definitely try Hamilton because it's awesome. But also because it sounds really good. It sounds really good.
Yeah. So, I mean, on the technical side, it is not a matter that if you just have a 12-bit signal coming from an Ultra HD Blu-ray player, that somehow your HDR is always going to look better than if it's a 10-bit signal coming from a streaming service. It is not the case that just because the audio is lossless, that it will always sound better than lossy. That is not necessarily the case. Yeah, on the audio side, there is certainly the case where some of the mixes are just different. So yeah, something like Hamilton, I would give that. Although I guess you can't compare that to the Ultra HD Blu-ray release of it or something like that.
No.
But well, give Thor Ragnarok a try, because there's an example where the Ultra HD Blu-ray
should not be as good.
Has a worse audio mix on it than the streaming version.
Sadly.
Does. So yeah,
one of my favorite movies, and I've got it on the Ultra HD Blu-ray, and I never ever watch. I always stream it.
Because the audio is
I always
disappointing.
stream it because the audio is so bad. Like, I have never in my life thought, I mean, I don't ever, like, once I'm a set it and forget it kind of guy, but I got to Thor Ragnarok and it made me question everything I believe in audio. I was like, there is something wrong.
Right.
There is something wrong. This should have bass. That should have made the couch shake. Look at what happened on the screen. My couch should be shaking right now. Clearly, I have done something incorrect. And I started yelling at the kids, who touched the subwoofer?
So, yeah, I mean, you can't just compare, like, something that you've only watched the streaming version and then compared it to some Ultra HD Blu-ray where you've only watched it on Ultra HD Blu-ray and they're completely different movies, completely different TV shows. You can't make that comparison and then draw a conclusion about streaming versus physical disc. It would have to be like for like content, and then something like Thor Ragnarok is a good example, because if you then go, hey, actually the streaming version of this is better than the disc, we're like, yeah, that's what we would expect, because we happen to know that the disc version has a really poor audio track on it in that particular movie. Now, he mentioned in his email that one of the things that looked very dim in HDR from Disney Plus was The Mandalorian, and I'm like, yeah, that show just looks very dim. That's one of the things. It is a dim show that has no peak highlights in its HDR that are above about 200 nits. That it doesn't have really bright highlights. It is an HDR signal. 200 nits is technically HDR because it's above 100 nits, and that's where standard dynamic range tops out.
If you're like me, someplace you've got, it doesn't have to be an Ultra HD Blu-ray either. I mean, I know that you want to test the HDR versus on an HDR, but if you just have a Blu-ray of a Marvel movie or a one of the many cartoons, Dory or something like that they put out, Finding Nemo, whatever, just grab that, watch a little bit of it, and then stream it and see how they compare. And that should give you. You just have to do an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
You can't look at. It's like me looking at maybe the Mandalorian, and then watching Dredd on Blu-ray. And I love Dredd on Blu-ray, but there are some scenes in that are straight up garbage. I mean, it looks like VHS quality. It is bad. Lots of compression artifacts, all sorts of weirdness going on in it, and I couldn't look at those two things and say that one was better than the other, because that's there's no apples to apples, as Rob was saying. So definitely get something you can test back and forth. You should have. I mean, there are going to be some issues with streaming. I mean, that's just the case. There's only so much they can give you. It's not going to be the same lossless audio that you can get from Blu-ray or Ultra HD Blu-ray. I wouldn't expect the picture quality to be quite as good, but honestly, I mean, a lot of times I'm sitting here watching the movie and I know I have the disc.
Yep.
But it's like, I literally have to walk out of the room and turn directly to the left, and it's right there on that wall. I mean, it's that close.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nah, I'm good.
I think Alan's got a little bit of the understandable expectation that it's like, if Disney Plus is saying, hey, this is Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos, that he's expecting a certain level of video and audio quality because of the formats. But we can't actually make that much of a generalization. The formats don't guarantee a level of video and audio quality. It's a container. It's just a bucket. and whatever they want can be put into that bucket. The bucket doesn't guarantee the quality of what gets put into the bucket.
That's right. And I mean, we wish that we could get full lossless everything, but once they finish scanning all of our bodies with 5G, is that what they're doing with it? I forgot what they're doing with it. Are they scanning us with it, or are they beaming things to us in it? I keep forgetting. I mean, I can't keep my conspiracy theories straight anymore.
Wait till people find out that millimeter waves are microwaves. That's what microwaves are millimeter waves. They wisely changed the name because
it's the European taking over, trying to change it from the imperial system.
They're all gonna cook us because there's no spectrum. It's just the name.
Don't get me started on microwaves right now. Right. Man. I just bought a new microwave and I hate it. All right, Raul. My wife made me buy it. We're gonna get the microwave installed into the new kitchen that we're getting. Yeah. Right. So we have a 7-year-old microwave that we love, but the door's getting a little wonky, and she's like, I don't want to install this thing into this thing, so we're gonna buy another one. So I went and found like the newest model that from the same company that looks exactly like the one that we have, and I got it, and it's garbage. I hate it. She hasn't used it yet. The one we had has a knob, right? And you turn the knob, and it made the time go up, and then you press start. All right. This one has a knob. You turn the knob, nothing happens.
Okay. Handy.
I don't know what the knob's there for. It's it doesn't have a keypad, so you can't. It's very confusing. I don't know what's happening with my stupid knob.
Probably needs an app.
Probably. I'm just waiting for a firmware update. It's coming out in December.
Time selection coming in December.
Raul, coming from Mexico. So down there in Mexico, he got a lightning strike that took out his TV. It is beyond repair, so he's looking to buy a replacement. Now I have this vision of Raul holding this TV above his head, blocking the lightning from striking his house. He's like,
I don't think so.
Sacrifice my TV to... Rawr. Okay, he wants to keep the price as low as possible. That has led him to the CCL, and he's looking at the 4 series. But there are different versions within the 4 series, some with Roku built in and others with Android TV built in. Is there a picture quality difference between them, or is it just a matter of picking the streaming platform you would prefer and the picture quality remains the same? Well, okay, so there's the actual panel. Yeah. Okay, so the panel itself has a capability, all right, whatever that capability is. And I don't know, like, within the Roku version versus the Android TV version, which, by the way, Roku and Android TV, I mean, isn't Roku just using Android TV with a different overlay?
No, Roku's their own thing. And
they have their own thing? Okay. So there's two aspects you have to worry about here. Are the panels identical? Meaning, did they have the same backlighting? Did they have the same dimming zones if they have that? Do they have the same, brightness and all that stuff? If that's the case, then the difference is going to be what the apps have access to within those two different formats. Meaning, Android TV's apps are going to be different from the apps that are in the Roku.
Right.
I tell you, if you got Roku, you're not getting Twitter. Twitter.
Twitch.
The other one, Twitch. Not getting Twitch. So
not getting
care about that.
HBO Max or what is it, Peacock either. I don't know if either of those are in Mexico at all, but they're not on Roku in any event, not yet. But yeah, so there's some little size differences. So they are sort of like two kind of separate lineups. It used to be that the 3 series was Android and then the 4 series was all Roku, but now they kind of just merged them together. But there's some sort of little TikTok things in the sizes that are available between them. The performance overall is very, very similar, if not outright the same. So it's not that if you are looking at an Android one that is the right screen size that you want and the price is a little bit cheaper, that somehow you're getting a lesser performance LCD panel because it's the Android version instead of the Roku version. You're fine on that front. I did just want to say, though, this is one of those cases where, like, we've certainly mentioned TCL, but we're primarily talking about the TCL 6 series or maybe the TCL 8 series, but mostly we're talking about the TCL 6 series when we talk about it here. This isn't a case where it's just like, oh, TCL, the brand, every single model they make we're a fan of. It's like, nah, it's a specific series that we're a fan of, and it's the 6 series. The 4 series, I'm, like, not a big fan of it. I mean, it's like edge lighting. They only get up to like barely even 200 nits, and yet they still accept an HDR signal. I'm like, no, you really can't see HDR on a TCL 4 series, even though it can take in the signal. The 5 series, I mean, of course, it's the 5 series. It's a little bit more expensive. It's still edge lit, but it's like quite a bit better. The contrast is about double. The light output gets up to about 500 nits. At least HDR kind of looks like HDR on the 5 series. So, I mean, I understand it. This was an unexpected purchase. You're looking for the least amount of money. If you're satisfied with the picture quality of a 4 series TCL, do not worry about whether it's Roku or Android, as long as it has the apps that you want. That's not the concern there. I'm just like, I'm a little leery of saying, oh yeah, because it's a TCL, it's going to be fantastic. It's like, nah, the 4 series is pretty not great in my opinion. So maybe just be prepared that you might get it home and go, yeah, that's really quite dim and doesn't look fantastic, and maybe I'm going to pay a little bit more for a 5 series. I can kind of.
Do we have an option for them though?
Well, because I don't
know how much the 4 series costs in Mexico.
Yeah, and I don't know if Vizio is available in Mexico. I'm not sure, because that would normally be the alternative I would point you to.
Alternative, yeah.
Would be a Vizio.
Why don't you go shopping, dude, and give us some options? Say these are all in the same price point ish that I can afford,
right?
And then we'll maybe give you some insight there, because that sounds like what we need to do. Because I don't know that. I mean, I have never been to Mexico, so I wouldn't even know what was there. They may have, who knows what imports they have there that we don't have up here. So, all right, Infinite Gary. Gary says, if you're running just a stereo analog RCA cable, red and white plugs, as people do these days, and you need a longer length, are the simple female-to-female couplers completely neutral and transparent, or would it be a good idea to buy a single stereo analog cable with a longer length? I want to mess with you, Gary, but I don't have the energy, so they're completely neutral and fine.
Yeah,
I guess it is theoretically possible that there might be a slight amount of like signal loss, but I mean, nothing that you would ever see. Or
if you want to get into the full technicalities, the issue of any type would actually be
resistance.
Well, no, it would be the RCA plugs themselves. RCA plugs attached to a coaxial cable are not the exact same impedance as the coaxial cable itself. Coaxial cables were meant to be connected with F-type connectors. Primarily with F-type connectors, the ones that screw in, like your cable connector. That will maintain the same impedance throughout the entire thing, connector and cable, or like SDI connectors. Those will also do it. RCA connectors weren't really meant to maintain the exact same impedance. In fact, they can't, from the design of it. Just the geometry of them won't allow it. So on a super technical level, you are altering the impedance of the cable at that point. But we're talking about audio. We're not talking about high bandwidth video. And so the difference is 0. So the ultimate answer is completely fine to couple your RCA cables for audio purposes.
What is our opinion, Gary asks, on classic albums being remixed in Dolby Atmos for music? Is it actually an improvement on the original album releases, or just a new toy in the toolbox for studios to play with? So I have heard remixes, like DTS remixes of classic albums, like Moody Blues, and it's the only one that comes to mind right now. But I've heard the Eagles one? I don't know, Bob Henley, a couple of them. And what you'll find within those albums is they have their big songs, whatever their big songs are, on there. And those big songs, they pay somebody who knows what the heck they're doing to do it, and it sounds pretty awesome. And everything else goes to an intern, as far as I can tell. The rest of the album sounds like hot garbage. But those good songs sound really good. And they are, So is it a new toy? Yes.
Yeah.
It is for fans. It is for hardcore fans that would buy, if they had alternate covers of this, they would buy all the different covers, so they had the full collection. This is for fans. And generally speaking, in my experience, when they do this, for the songs that matter, they take their time and they do it right. For the rest of the songs, it is a mixed bag at best.
And I mean, even for those hit songs, it's going to be different. That's the point, is to have it sound different. If you're just like, this is, I listen to the stereo version, or it might be the mono version if it's old enough, and they're like, that's the way this song to me is supposed to sound, and anything different from that, I'm going to consider not right. I mean, this is a subjective thing. How can you say there's a right or wrong way to play a song, right? So it's very much a subjective issue here. Is it an improvement? That's a subjective choice. I do like that this is something that is being done, because the music industry for a long time now has been saying, how do we move on to something from CD? They want to sell you the same album again and again and again if they can. And they've tried to do the high-res audio thing, which we're like, we've debunked that. We're like, no, yes, it is possible for it to sound better because you remastered it. It has nothing to do with the container that you put it in. It has nothing to do with it being higher bitrate and higher sampling rate now. It's not necessary to hold everything that we can hear, but they've been trying to do that. I'm like, Atmos is something I can get behind, because that is completely remixing it. This is a genuine difference. This isn't some falsely made up claim of better quality when it really isn't. It's like, no, this is a new, different thing. And if you're excited by hearing an album that you already love in a new way, then I'm all for it. I think it's nice.
So there's a link here. I'm sure we'll be linking this up or whatever, but I just skimmed it while Rob was talking. It says, when I work in Atmos, I like to keep the voice front and center. I've heard Atmos mixes I like where the vocal is behind you, but I keep the vocal up front. Dude, who put the vocal behind somebody? What monster did that?
Someone who was definitely playing. It was like, I can do this, so I will.
Yeah, but you shouldn't.
No.
You shouldn't.
No.
All right, Fred. Fred has a Denon X8300H that lost its HDMI outputs to a lightning strike, as well as his active HDMI cables. On our advice, he wrote to both Accessories for Less, where he had purchased the Denon, as well as writing to Denon, as well as a couple of repair shops. He was well beyond any return or exchange window with Accessories for Less, as well as past the 1-year warranty, so Accessories for Less could not do anything directly, but they did suggest checking with his house insurance to see if you might have any coverage. And they said they've been seeing a lot of lightning damage problems lately. Replacing the HDMI board is going to be the only fix in their experience, and that's going to cost several $100s. One of the repair shops explains that they would charge a $50 evaluation fee. Nailed it. Totally said that. Which would be applied to the repair. Said that as well. Repair costs if you went ahead with it, just as we predicted. But they wouldn't give any sort of ballpark figure on what an HDMI board replacement might cost. The other repair shop was more forthcoming. They said they would expect at least $400, but it could be more if there are any other parts or labor involved. So with that, he decided to just buy a replacement for Accessories for Less instead, and the X4300H will get recycled. All right, so there, got a new one. Yay. He purchased one of the new APC gaming performance back UPS units that we recently recommended. Would there be any benefit, as in additional protection, to plugging his AV receiver into one of the battery outlets as opposed to the surge-only outlets?
Nope.
Well, the benefit would be that it won't turn off when
right.
when the power goes out. But other than that, I don't think there's any benefit there.
No, there's no additional protection in the way of lightning strike or surge on the power line. It is a line interactive, so the battery is doing nothing until it detects that the power has been cut out. Then within milliseconds, the battery kicks in to replace the power. But in terms of protecting you from a surge or lightning strike, nothing more. We should mention, as Mario kindly wrote in last week again, that the surge protection, something like a back UPS unit from APC, that is your last line of defense. That if you have lost something to a lightning strike, then you really want to double check the grounding of every system, every electrical system, including your cable, your antenna, your satellite, your telephone, all of that. Make sure that is all bonded ground. Now that should be your first line of defense, not the APC.
So he has a cable that goes from his over-the-air antenna that is in his loft down to the wall outlet behind his TV. He bought an inline surge suppressor for that antenna cable. Does it matter whether he plugs that in at the TV end or the antenna end up in his loft? So what side does he plug it in at? it shouldn't make any
source
difference.
or sync. Yeah, and it doesn't make a difference. In fact, he wrote back in an email, I think it was today or yesterday, and he's like, oh, the instructions say plug it in on either end. So it was more convenient in his case with a wall-mounted TV to plug it in at the antenna end, and that is what he has done now. And yeah, so instructions would say that. That's what we would have said too.
There we go. Victor has a 7.1.4 setup using Paradigm Premier 800F front speakers and Paradigm CI Pro in-wall and in-ceiling speakers for surrounds, backs, and Atmoses. Atmos I. I don't know. It's all powered by a Denon X8500H, and since he has 11 speakers, he's using a crown amp to power the rear heights. Do we think he should get something like the Emotiva XPA-3 to power his front 3 speakers instead? Would that free up his Denon in any beneficial way, or just leave things the way they are?
How far away are you sitting? And almost certainly not.
I was going to say. We already kind of addressed this, but the answer is no. I mean, can you see your speakers? I mean, are they so far away that you can't see them? Because, you know,
right. Because, I mean, paradigms are not hard to drive.
8 ohms, like, what, 87 to 89 sensitivity.
They're often even a bit higher. They're often like 89, 90. You know, they're on the high end of a dome tweeter design for efficiency. Paradigms are among some of the easiest speakers to drive, to be honest. So unless you are, I'm going to say with those speakers, 20 feet or more away, you don't need an external amplifier for those.
Now, if you want to buy one anyways... Go with God, good sir.
I've got
Enjoy
one, and
purchase.
I'm in a tiny room, like 6 feet away from my speakers, and I've got an ATI amplifier. So if you just want it, that's okay, but you do not need it.
Rob is a poster boy for buying things in audio and video that you do not need, but that you just want.
Definitely.
So he's the patron saint. If he were dead, we would all be having him intercede
I
for
want
us.
17 speakers.
We're going to need more patrons if we're going to get 70 speakers.
Yep. Especially if they all have ribbon tweeters. Because, you know, when they're up there in your upper corners and you barely even notice them, they gots to be ribbons.
They gots to be ribbons. You don't want to miss any of that high-end extension of those Atmos speakers.
Man.
The clarity. Oh, my God. Kris has a Denon X8500H. He is currently running a 7.2.4 configuration, but he's thinking he might like to expand to 6 Atmos speakers. At the moment, he has 4 in-ceiling speakers, top fronts and top rears, rather than another pair of in-ceiling speakers. You think he'd like to add front heights? Nope.
Well,
but reading through the manual, he's not sure if that is if that option is available. Do we know if he can add front heights while retaining his top fronts and top rears? If not, what is the next best setup option for him?
this isn't...
I thought you couldn't have top fronts and top heights or front heights or whatever.
Well, yeah.
I didn't think you could have that.
So this is an X8500H. This is the 13-channel Denon flagship receiver. It has 13 amplifiers built into it. It can do 7.2.6. But when you tell it that I have 6 overhead speakers, there's more than 2 available configurations, but for Atmos configuration, because there's a whole Oro 3D options that come into play. But barring that, the Atmos options are front heights with top middles and rear heights, or top fronts and top middles and top rears. Those are the 2 Atmos options with 6 overhead speakers. But that's just the labels. It's just the labels. So he's like, I have top fronts and top rears. I guess he's thinking to himself, he doesn't have top middles. He doesn't have something directly above his seats. He's got a pair of speakers that are a little bit in front of him and a pair of speakers that are a little bit behind him. And then he's like, I could put 2 more speakers up on my front wall and have them as front heights. You would need to relabel what are currently labeled your top fronts. They would have to be relabeled as top middles. And the ones that are behind you would have to be relabeled as, if you're going to call the ones on your front wall front heights, then they would have to be relabeled as rear heights. Now, the steering of all the sounds is going to be pretty darn correct. The only question is, I don't know how far in front of you your top fronts are.
Yeah.
Are your top fronts well in front of you? Because if they are. Your better option might be installing a new pair of speakers directly above you. Because then you can definitely call them top fronts, top middles, top rears.
Yeah. Right. So I don't necessarily agree. I mean, they would have to be like within. I mean, I know we usually say 5 feet in front of you, right? For top
front / front heights.
Yeah, yeah. If they were anything more than 2.5 feet in front of me, I would have a hard time calling them
the middles, right?
Yeah, I mean, so unless they're like real tight up on you, bub, I would say your best bet is to install top middles and call them and do that, because I really don't. First of all, you cannot label them the way you want to label them, and even if you could,
you can't label it front height, top front, top rear. That's not an available option. That cannot. Right. So something in the 6 has to be labeled as top middles in the type of scenario that you're talking about. So it's either that you're going to relabel something you already have as top middles, or you're going to install top middles. One or the other.
Right. So, and even if you could label them the way that you want to label them, top fronts and top and front heights, the difference in how much, what would be the difference in the content they would be playing would be minimal at best. So either one's not playing anything, or the other one's not playing anything, or they're both just basically stereo imaging a mono signal at you.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't steer things any differently whether it's labeled top fronts or front heights. So that's why they don't let you have both of those labeled together. It's either they're labeled front heights or top fronts. Pick one or the other, because they're going to end up playing the same sounds. So yeah, it's all about are you going to relabel something you already have as top middles, or are you going to install top middles? That's really ends up being the question.
All right, this is going to be the last one, I think. I've got.
I know it's already past midnight for you.
Inspections, inspection. We have an inspection tomorrow morning. So, David got a 77-inch LG CX OLED from Costco, and using the various test patterns on YouTube that we suggested, he thoroughly examined his panel and discovered it is not flawless. He found 4 dead green subpixels, 3 dead red subpixels. He plotted their location on a graph. So we're looking at the graph. There's a couple in the top rightish and a couple in the bottom left corner.
Yep. So nothing dead in the middle, but there's a red and a green that are like coming down, like about a quarter from the top and a quarter from the right. Those would be the worst as far as being close to the center.
So he says fair ways back, 15 to 18 feet, and if he's watching actual content instead of full screen solid colors, he can't notice them, but now he knows they are there. So what should he do? Exchange it at Costco, make it a stink to LG, or do his best to ignore it? What would we do if it were our TV? And is this an indication of a bum panel that might get worse over time, or is this actually a decent result and he runs the risk of a replacement being even worse? So let me tell you what I would do.
Okay.
The first thing I would do is I would, if I didn't know Rob and didn't know about this podcast, I would do an internet search to find out whether or not dead subpixels are common or not common.
Sure.
I would then almost certainly, regardless of what I read, still return it to Costco for an exchange. And I would do the same thing again that you just did, and find out whether or not I got a panel that was worse or better or whatever. Regardless, it would almost certainly end up in the same situation, which is either it's now a perfect panel and now I'm happy, or it's got some flaws and I still can't see it from a distance, in which case I would live with what I had.
Right.
So Rob's going to tell you whether or not subpixels are a problem. Stuck subpixels are indicative of a bad panel.
Right. So first of all, LG actually has a policy when it comes to stuck or dead pixels, and how many they basically allow before they consider it an automatic warranty replacement. And for something with 4K resolution like your OLED, it is 12. So you are under that. So if you were to raise this with LG, they'd say, by their own stated policy, they're not required to do anything. You have counted 7, and they allow themselves up to 12. It is interesting that what you have are dead sub-pixels. So it's not as though it's an entire pixel that is dead and black on your screen. He noticed this because he did solid primary and secondary colors
Right.
one at a time. And so it is the red subpixel, the green and the blue subpixel, and I would presume the white subpixel, since they have 4 subpixels in LG OLEDs, red, green, blue, and white. They're still working. It's just the red in some instances, or just the green in some instances. I would also say that dead subpixels are much easier to live with than stuck subpixels, or full pixels. If you have a stuck pixel that is always on, that is much more noticeable than a pixel that is always off and black. Because on an OLED, where black is truly black, the comparison of having something that is always on when the screen goes black versus something that's always off when the rest of the screen is lit up, you're much less likely to see that. Like you said, from your own regular viewing distance and regular content, it's not like you're noticing, oh, there is one red subpixel up towards the right hand corner or down towards the left, a green subpixel that is not off. It's going to be really, really hard to notice. That said, I have seen completely flawless OLED panels. I have also seen OLED panels that are worse than this. I would not allow the fear of a possibility that, yes, panels that are even worse than this do exist. I wouldn't stop you from trying at least one exchange. Costco will survive. All right,
They're gonna put that stuff right back on the floor anyways.
Of course,
dude. Don't worry about that.
You exchanging this for it to try another one. Costco is going to be fine. You're not costing them their business, and there are completely flawless ones out there, or maybe they have one dead subpixel or something like that, and you're never going to notice it. I've had both scenarios. I've had one where there was actually kind of a cluster of dead, like full pixels dead, but they were way up close to the top edge. If I had any sort of black bars, including the really skinny ones from 1.85 to 1 content, they were within the black bars. And then even during normal content, because they were so close to the top edge, I never ever noticed them there unless I got right up on it and knew specifically where to look. Whereas I had a different display. It was an LCD, but I had a different display that had one stuck pixel, but it was almost right in the middle of the screen, and there was no way to not notice the stupid thing. And it was 1 out of 8 million. So, where it is matters, whether it's dead versus stuck matters. If you were to keep this, I wouldn't really blame you, because this is not the worst result. None of these are in the middle. They are dead, not stuck. It is subpixels, not full pixels. And LG would just say, hey, 7 instead of 12. We're not even going to do anything about it. And
it's a massive difference between a dead subpixel, subpixel. It's easy for me to say, and one that's stuck.
Yeah.
Having a little itty bitty black spot is certainly not going to be noticeable.
And I mean, it's not even a black spot, because the other subpixels are still active. It's rare that it's going to be just like pure red, pure green with no other, subpixel around it emitting any light whatsoever. So yeah, if you were to keep it, you don't have to worry that somehow like more pixels are going to die on you. Like, this is just how it comes off the factory floor. Right. The way this is done, it's a chemical process where things are kind of injected into it, and some out of those 8 million plus subpixels don't always make it out perfect, and that's why they allow themselves 12. So yeah, it's a little bit hem and haw, but Costco is very good on return and exchange policies. I'm not the least bit worried about you hurting their business or something. It's not some little mom and pop shop. So I would try one exchange, because I have seen ones that are, maybe there's one dead subpixel or completely flawless.
All right, let's who we got
We
left?
have Bob in the Philippines, Everett, Dan, and Ken. And then there were a couple of questions that came in on Monday and Tuesday morning. So next week, somebody will be here to tackle some questions.
Somebody will answer them. Maybe they'll be me, maybe it won't.
Hopefully
It'll
Tom.
certainly be Rob.
If not Tom, me, and maybe somebody else. We'll find out.
Well, now we'll see if DJ comes through with the cheddar.
Could be.
I want to thank our listeners of the week. I want to thank Kris, David, Andrew, and Arturo for going to avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and sending us a PayPal donation.
Yes, indeed. Kris, David, Andrew, and Arturo, thank you very much for those PayPal donations. Really do appreciate that.
And we want to thank our 124 patrons over at patreon.com.
We sure do. That's patreon.com/AVRant Podcast. If you'd like to sign up, think of it as a voluntary subscription or an automatic monthly donation. And thanks to our 124 patrons over there.
I want to thank Nelson and Fred for talking us up to Accessories for Less, as well as Dan for offering to send me some good seasoning Italian dressing so my middle son, who will eat nothing other than that dressing, will have some.
That'd be great.
Thank you very much.
Dan, thank you very much for thinking of Tom that way. Nelson and Fred, thank you for talking us up to Accessories for Less.
And the notes of gratitude for Gurinder, Victor, Stefan, Michael, and Kris and Dan. So thank you very much for the notes of gratitude.
Indeed, Gurinder, Victor, Stefan, Michael, Kris, and Dan really do appreciate those notes of gratitude. It's very nice to read, and it's encouraging. And again, thank you to everyone for continuing to listen and sending in your questions to question@avrant.com. We do enjoy answering them, and it's wonderful to keep this community going. So thank you, everybody.
That's right. For AVRant, I'm Tom Andry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.